That was the first time that I truly felt like myself with a capital S. And it took the complete destruction of my body and the near death through the sepsis for this to occur. Once that permanent connection is made, the information or the wisdom, the access to everything is online. The wisdom will just flow because the finite mind or body consciousness has been turned off. There was a moment when I was in the hospital rehab when I was quite sick and still paralyzed. It was pretty early on in that process, and I can remember it vividly. And I was sitting in the hospital bed, and paralyzed from the chest, really sick. I mean, near death. And there was just this moment where all so-called knowledge and ignorance were literally seen as the same thing, and the whole thing, it literally just fell away. It was gone. There was total clarity, serenity, peace, and a level of knowingness, gnosis, right? To the self, which is the only true knowledge that exists, is knowledge of self. It literally happened in that moment, and it's absolutely tangible. There's a lightness to our beingness. There's a freedom to our beingness. There's no confusion. There's no inner turmoil. There isn't even a striving for anything. The whole thing it's almost, we could say that the matrix had revealed itself and just kind of parted, as as a way of saying it. I'm just trying to pick another way of saying it, but Gary, you can feel it.
Yeah.
There's a tangible quality, and all the inauthenticity of our human character, the ego mind identity, or the pattern subconscious egoic mind, it's literally it just dissolves, and it never actually returns. And you feel it starting in that moment. That was the first time as RJ that I truly felt like myself with a capital S. That was really me. It's almost like that's my real birthday. That's the day that I was truly born. And it took the complete destruction of my body and the near death through the sepsis for this to occur.
Yeah, quite the rebirth.
Yeah,
is a similar story between the people that I speak to and having this intimate dawning of greater self. It's approaching near death, whether it's through some kind of actual near death experience like you, or some kind of almost maybe simulated experience in the mind, an ego death. It seems to be a killing of the ego. We've all heard that before. And then being reborn into a genuine sense of how you live here. It's interesting that it came to you in that way. And I do feel as though that's how it comes about in a lot of our lives, is like we have to kill the illusion. We have to get rid of the false ideal of who we thought we were, and then truly be reborn. But sometimes it takes some really intense experiences to get there. Do you say that is like a sort of blueprint for one to tap into that? It's a killing of the ego in one way or the other.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the caterpillar completely and utterly destroys itself.
Yeah.
Right. Self-immolation for it to become what it truly is, the butterfly. And I think you're 100% right. And if we look at the ego death and then physical death, right? So the main or foundation, at least from my perspective, the foundation of the ego mind identity is the misidentification with the form.
Yep.
With the body, right? Which then reduces us to what I call body consciousness, which is just 5 senses, and the data stream that comes in is what forms our intellect, right? Now, none of that is actually what we are. Zero. So I think there's a real correlation between ego death and physical death, because as we approach physical death, the ego has nothing to identify itself with anymore, because we identify with the body. And if the body is in the throes of death, right, the ego is going to have a hard time clinging.
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
sometimes they go hand in hand. But I also feel that it's possible. So if we look at someone like Ramana Maharshi, so there was no physical challenge, right?
Yep.
That was almost what we could call spontaneous
Mm.
enlightenment, right? So sometimes, Gary, everything that we just said, right? Now that didn't apply. I mean, there's always outliers, right? There's always exceptions,
Yeah.
but that certainly didn't apply to Ramana. So, but probably in general, if there isn't some kind of near death experience or something so destructive to the false construct that we have built within the ego mind identity, um, I feel that for most people, that's the avenue that we take in order to truly wake up. We have to see past the illusion of our misperceptions, misunderstandings, and misidentifications. And I know for me that moment, I was near enlightenment, probably quite frankly, for years and years and years. And I think I was quite satisfied to be nearly enlightened, but clearly I had other plans. The
Mm.
destruction of my body forced me to tap into more of who and what I really am, and to summon all my powers to be able to put my body back together. But I do think there's real synergy between physical death and ego death. And then at the same time, as we just said, there's also outliers, and I think Ramana Maharshi is a great example of an outlier.
Do you think these outliers are outliers because they had these experiences in past lives? You know, when we get into reincarnation, it's because they kind of already went through that stuff.
Yeah, that's a brilliant insight. So I would definitely say that it works like a muscle memory,
Mm-hmm.
right? So once we have experienced authentic liberation, self-realization, enlightenment, which are really the same thing, and then there's what's past enlightenment, believe it or not. But once this is experienced, it becomes, it's like a muscle memory, and that's kind of what I've described. What all these different books and prescriptive courses that I teach, it all this just came back to me. This was a
Yeah.
remembering. This
Uh-huh.
was an absolute remembering. It's like and how I describe it, I remembered how to heal myself.
Mm.
Right. So I think once we do it once, that it's literally feels like a muscle memory, and we can draw upon it really in any incarnation at any time.
Mm.
So there's a meditation, and we just did this meditation in the San Diego workshop, and I've used to teach this meditation actually as a course itself, and maybe I'll do that again at some point. But to truly reconnect with your other incarnations, to truly reconnect with your higher self, the first thing I want to say is you are your higher self. Okay, just like an octopus drops a tentacle down to see what the water is like here. Okay, so you and me are the tentacle, but the tentacle is part of the octopus. So we are our higher self, just less in volume, about 2.5%. Now, when we come back to and reconnect directly with the higher self, that is what self-realization or enlightenment actually is. When that has been normalized, okay, not just like a moment or so, or, we had this one meditation and then you're kind of back to body consciousness. Okay. So the normalization of making that connection permanent. So an analogy that we could use is if you have as I'm looking out at my side yard, if you have a yard, right? And Amelia, you start cutting across the yard in the exact same way over and over again, right? You wear out the grass. All of a sudden, there's just dirt there. It's a dirt path because you're wearing out the grass, right? Because you have continually gone over the same thing over and over again. So when we meditate to reconnect properly by going up the frequencies and the dimensions to where our higher self resides within the multiverse, if you do that often enough, it's just like cutting across the backyard. There is now a permanent connection, an absolute permanent connection. And once that permanent connection is made, the information or the wisdom, the access to everything is online. It's absolutely online. Now, you have to bust your behind to be able to make that connection, because when we're all the way down, and it's not down, it's just lower frequency. It's all right here. you actually have to become very diligent, very dedicated to be able to. And that's like I said, this is what self-realization or enlightenment is. It's the permanent unification with your higher self, even while you're here. That is what enlightenment is. And there's much past enlightenment. But by doing a meditation over and over again, right, you're wearing out that path, and pretty soon you have this connection. And then it can literally, the wisdom will just flow, because the finite mind or body consciousness has been turned off. You no longer identify with the five physical senses in terms of constant analysis. So if we stop the constant analysis of the data stream that's coming in through the five physical senses, which is what actually creates your finite lower consciousness or the intellect, once you stop identifying, you'll cease with the constant analysis and judgment. And now the connection that you've made, that's the information that will be flowing nonstop, literally nonstop. And beings that actually do that are authentically enlightened beings or self-realized beings. And so it's constantly doing it over and over and over again until that connection is solidified and normalized, and then the information will flow without a stop.